So what's going on, guys? DIY Dan here again. This is another episode of Day to Day Around the House. In this video, I had my LG direct drive washing machine take a crap. I was getting a code of an OE. So I'm going to go over what that OE means, what I did to diagnose the problem, and how to fix it. So after doing a quick search on the internet, basically that OE code on the LG washing machines means that it is not able to discharge the water. And even if you don't have an LG washing machine, but you're having a similar problem where the tub is full of water and it just won't get rid of it, this video should help you out with the techniques I'm using in it. So let's get to it. So if your washing machine's anything like mine, when it was throwing that code, basically I had a full tub of dirty water because it would not discharge the water out of the washing machine. We had tried unplugging it and plugging it in, kind of giving it a reset to see if that would do anything, and it did not. What we did notice is when it was in the rinse or spin cycle, when it was trying to work, that a humming sound was coming from the lower corner of the back of the washing machine. So I was immediately thinking that was probably the pump locked up and just wouldn't pump anything, but there was electricity going to the pump, and that's what was giving us that humming sound from the corner. So this washing machine is supposedly a smart washing machine. There is an app called LG ThinQ that you can go in and download and will theoretically help you with diagnosing any problems with your washing machine. While trying to get hooked up to this thing, I almost lost my patience and threw my iPad across the room. After unplugging and plugging the washing machine in about 50 times, trying to get it to connect to it, I just gave up and went old school with the diagnostic. I never actually got the washing machine to show up on my Wi-Fi so I could sync up to it on my iPad. Now, because that washing machine was full of water, it was way too heavy to move. So what I ended up doing is grabbing one of my spare aquarium utility pumps and pumping that water from the washing machine directly into the drain in the wall to empty it out so it would be light enough to move out and take a look and see what's going on. For safety reasons, guys, anytime you are taking tools to this appliance, make sure it is unplugged so you don't possibly get a shocking experience. I removed the 4 screws that were holding the backing on this washing machine. There are also some tabs on the top and bottom that help hold that backing in place. In order to get it out of those, I found it easiest to pull on the center of the backing, and that enabled it to bend a little bit to come out of those tabs. Once pulling that off, I was able to see the discharge pump, which was in the lower right-hand corner if you were looking at it from the rear of the washing machine. So in all actuality, there's only a couple things that could keep a washing machine from not discharging the water. One is obviously a bad pump. The other is possibly a blocked or kinked discharge hose. And the third being is possibly the controller that controls the discharge pump to actually engage is not turning it on. So if you are subscribed to my channel, you guys know I always tell you the dumb stuff I do. So hopefully you guys don't make those same mistakes. If you're not, well, now you know. In this case, the dumb mistake that I made was actually trying to repair this thing in my laundry room instead of taking the time to take it out to my garage where I didn't have to worry about any water possibly damaging my floor. Now, I knew there was going to be water under this thing, which is why I propped it up on a couple 2x4s so I could put a Tupperware container underneath it to catch the water. However, I didn't realize how much water it was going to be in there, and I did spill quite a bit on the floor while I was taking the hoses off. The hoses were held on by a couple of spring-loaded clips that you should be able to just compress by hand. If not, you could get a pair of pliers to assist. Now, these hoses were on that pump pretty good, so I did have to use a small flathead screwdriver to get underneath the hose to break the seal from the pump, being careful not to damage the hose in the process. So after about 3 Tupperware containers full of water and a towel to pick up the mess I made, I did get the hose removed from the tub to the pump off, and then I went ahead and removed the clamp and the discharge hose coming out of the pump. So being as though all that water was dumping out of that black hose that was going to the tub, I knew that wasn't blocked in any way. And once removing the discharge hose and kind of blowing through it, I knew that that wasn't blocked in any way either. So then I decided it was probably going to be the pump and removed it. Using a 10mm socket on a nut driver, I removed the 3 screws that were holding this pump to the frame of the washing machine. Once removing those screws, I did lift the pump up and out so I could get a better visual on it. And then taking note of the 2 wire colors and the position they were in on the pump, I went ahead and unplugged those and removed the pump from the washing machine. So being as though this is an AC pump and the direction of the wires doesn't really matter, I did take note that the blue wire was on the side of the pump that had the discharge line going to it, and that the gray wire was on the side closest to the actual tub of the washing machine. So I could put them on the same way I took them off. So both of those wire connections are just a spade connector, so if you just pull on them, they should disconnect from the pump. When pulling on those wire connections, try and pull on the plastic housing, not on the actual wire, so you don't possibly pull the wire out of the crimp on the spade connector. So I ended up making a jumper wire harness so I could test this pump. Now keep in mind, this isn't the most scientific way to do this, but it did get the job done, and I'm going to show you how to do it safely. So when I have an appliance go bad, I usually cut the power cords off because they tend to come in handy for situations like this. Being as though the pump was only a 2-wire and the power cord that I was using to jump it was a 3-wire, you'll notice I did not hook up or put a spade connector on the green wire on the power cord. Basically, since this pump was a 2-wire, they were using the hot and the neutral and not using a ground on this pump. Before even thinking about making a jumper wire like this and testing it this way, you do need to verify that it is a 120 volt AC pump and not a DC pump. The reason I say this is DC pumps are becoming more and more popular. So right here you can see that this is the old pump that I took out. It does say 120 volts on it. Now it does not say AC on it, but this is the sign for alternating current. Here's the little aquarium pump that also says it's 120 volts AC that I use to pump out the washing machine to get all the water out. So here's another one of my aquarium pumps. You'll notice the DC 24 volt. If you end up plugging in 120 volts AC to a DC pump, most likely you're going to end up burning up the electric motor that runs that pump, even if it wasn't bad. Worst case, you might end up heating up the wiring that you're using to jump that motor to see if it was bad, and possibly burn your hands or worse. So please be careful if you do decide to do this test. The other thing to keep in mind if you are doing this test this way is make sure you put the spade connectors on the pump before plugging it into the wall, and that way your hands are completely free of any bare wire while you are doing this test. You can also put a pair of gloves on to add another layer of safety. The other thing to keep in mind, which you might be worried about, is putting the wires in the right location. Because it is alternating current, it does not matter which spade goes on which side when you're hooking it up to do this test. So it's kind of hard to hear because I do have the TV on watching some football while I'm doing this, but you can hear a little hum coming as soon as I plug it in, telling you that it is putting juice to the motor, but it's not spinning, telling us this pump is bad. Now, if you take that pump out of the washer and it's got that electrical burnt smell to it, there's really no point in even doing this test. Now, after I knocked the pump around a little bit and I did the same test, it did break free and started to rotate. You can also do this test while the pump is still in the washing machine if you can get to the wire connections, and if you can verify that it does say it's 120 volts AC pump. Now, depending on the manufacturer of the pump, it might be labeled usually anywhere from 110, maybe 115, up to 120 volts on the pump itself, if it is AC volts. Now, if you do hook this jumper up to the pump and it's turning on and off every time, especially if you tested it in the washing machine, then most likely your circuit board or controller that's telling that pump to come on has gone bad. Another test you can do while the pump is still in the washing machine is use a multimeter, put it to AC volts, put one of your leads on each one of the wires going into that pump, and then run your washing machine and let it go through its cycle. And when it goes to drain that water, see if you're getting that 124 volts or 120 volts going to that pump, and that would tell you whether your pump is not pumping and it is getting the voltage, or whether it is not getting the voltage to the pump. Another thing that's pretty common these days with washing machines, and I know my dryer does it, is you can force it into a test mode cycle where you can make it do certain functions. However, I could not find my manual for this washing machine, which is usually taped up in it somewhere. But that would be a good way to force it to turn on that discharge pump and test it that way while it is in the machine as well. Now, being as though mine was locked up at first, and even though I broke it loose and it started turning, I wasn't going to trust it. I did end up going on Amazon and ordering a new pump. I just went ahead and typed the part number in the search bar and it came right up. This is the one I ended up getting, and you'll notice it's the exact same part number as the old one that was in the washing machine. So at first I was going to try and just replace the electric motor itself to save some money. However, the housing for the pump did not fit on correctly, so make sure everything looks identical if you do order off of Amazon, and make sure it is free returns in case it is incorrect. So being as the bracketry didn't come with the new pump, I just removed the 2 screws out of the bottom and then put those off to the side. Since at first I was trying to see if I could just buy the motor, I did disassemble this pump. There was a little plastic tab that I had to push out so I could rotate the pump housing around to get it off of the motor. Once doing that, I did decide to try and jump it again to see what would happen, and right here you can see that once I dislodged it, the motor did start turning again. Once I got the pump from Amazon, all I had to do was put the 2 screws that held the bracketry back to the pump. So one other mistake that I did make is I didn't match up and make sure these pumps were identical before installing the bracketry, because if it is incorrect, it's going to be much easier to return when they don't see that you've tried to install it already, so watch out for that. The only other thing is the new pump did not come with the little clips to hold this plastic piece on top of the motor. So I'm assuming they just realized they didn't need that and there was no purpose to it. So right here I am matching those up before actually installing them to make sure everything else looked the same, which is what I should have done earlier. I plugged the wires in the exact same position as they were. Like I said, with alternating current, it doesn't really matter, but I wanted to put them back the same way. And then I just set that in place, attached the hoses, and put the screws back in to hold it in position. So when the wife and I pulled the washing machine out from the laundry room, we did notice it looked like there had been a small water leak that had been saturating the floor a little bit over time. So we decided after putting that pump in that we would run a load of laundry out in the garage, so when we moved it after that we could make sure there was no drips underneath it. It also allowed me to make sure I had put the hoses on correctly and that I didn't have any leaks from those, as well as maybe the leak was coming from somewhere else and I just thought it was coming from the old pump. So I grabbed the cold water line from the laundry room and hooked it up to the washing machine, which will go directly into a garden hose, and then went ahead and ran my discharge hose into a sink that I have right outside the door, and then ran that load of laundry, made sure everything was working correctly, which it did. You'll notice that the water coming out from the discharge line is really green. That is just from the soap that I have that I use for my work clothes. It's an industrial strength detergent. Once it ran a full cycle and we didn't have any water leaks underneath the washing machine, I went ahead and installed the back panel back on the washing machine, once again bending it in the middle to get it in those 4 tabs on the top and bottom, and then went ahead and installed the 4 screws and tightened those down. Then all that was left to do was go ahead and put it back in the laundry room. When hooking up the hoses, usually hand strength is good to tighten them down. If you don't have much hand strength, you might just want to give them a little bit more than what you can do by hand with a pair of pliers. Go ahead and plug it in and go ahead and put that discharge hose back in the wall. And that's about all there is to it, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and it gave you some good information. If so, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. My channel is loaded with all kinds of DIYs, all with the same concept, give you the most information in the least amount of time as possible so I don't waste your time. And I hope to see you next time. Have a good one. Later.